Okay, let's start. So, hello, welcome to this workshop. I am Elisabeth Lacaze, and I work at the CIP, which is quite the same service as you have in SMU, the Center for Teaching Excellence. So we organize workshops to give teachers an opportunity to share their experience, and specifically in teaching innovation. So we are doing this like 3 or 4 times a year. Today we chose to share this workshop with you in Singapore. So Professor Gwenaëlle Nogatchewsky and Philippe Mairesse may share the innovation with you, which is about teaching accounting using arts. So I leave the professors say what they have to say. So thank you for your participation. And please make sure to be in front of a microphone for the French participants when you want to ask a question. Okay, so we can record.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm Gwenaëlle Nogatchewsky, Associate Professor at Paris-Dauphine University. I'm the director of Master's 2 called Advice and Research in Audit and Management Control. We carried out an original experiment last September in the Masters. Indeed, for their first week, the students did a 4-day workshop that was intended to associate arts and accounting. I mean here accounting as a discipline in a broad sense that incorporates accounting, control, and audit. Philippe and I are going to present the goals of this workshop, the way it took place, and the results. Here is the plan of the presentation. First, I will explain why I had this odd idea and the goals of the workshop. Then Philippe will explain how it took place and the output. So, why a creative workshop for accounting students? First, I would like to say a few words about this Masters. It was created in 1990 by a very famous French professor in accounting called Bernard Collas. It was the only French research Masters in accounting, control and audit in France. And in 2011, I took over the direction of the Masters, and after a while, Paris-Dauphine asked me to open a professional path. Since 2014, we have a research and a professional path. Therefore, the students do not have the same expectations and the same background. They come from very heterogeneous universities. 25% come from Paris-Dauphine, around 15% come from one of the most famous French universities called École Normale Supérieure, and the others come from middle universities, and some come from abroad, from China, from Canada, from Tunisia, etc. After this Masters, 80% embrace a career in internal or management controlling firms and in financial auditing in audit firms. The other 20% pursue a PhD program. So the identity of the Masters when I took over its direction was very focused on research. I wanted to keep the research focus and the research state of mind, but I also had to stress professional skills. Besides, given the heterogeneity of the students, I wanted also to create a cohesive group. Moreover, when I took the direction of the Masters, I read the Brussels Directive on Master's degrees and its focus on training by research. Until the first year of the master's, the students learn the techniques. As far as the accounting master is concerned, the techniques deal with budgeting, cost accounting, etc. The students acquire a first level of skills that enable them to execute and replicate what they have learned. The second year of the master's has to give the students a second level of skills. The ability to criticize, to propose solutions, to communicate, to manage projects, etc. The training by research points the second level of skills. Different means can be considered. The research essay is the most common. Theoretical courses and research seminars are also widespread. I thought of another way of promoting the second level of skills that could take place at the beginning of the academic year, I mean September, and that would create a cohesion of the group. So why not, or why a creative workshop? The creative workshop could pursue my different goals. First, I wanted the students to think about accounting beyond techniques, to question the construction, the role of figures, the meanings and their representations of the models and accounting standards, etc. Second, I wanted the students to be able to sustain a project in an unforeseen context. In accounting and control, we usually ask students to work on case studies. They have to calculate costs, to elaborate budgets from a statement. They have to deliver the solution the teacher expects. But in real life, there is often no good solution. And the way to find one, an acceptable one, is often unpredictable. I thought the workshop was a good training for it. Third, I wanted to create a cohesive group from the beginning of the year. As I said before, students came from various more or less famous universities. Thanks to the workshop, there were, for the first day of their academic year, all novices. Actually, the first day, some of them were very, very surprised by the workshop. I had told them they would follow a 4-day workshop called, a 4-day artistic workshop called Creative Accounting. In fact, I had called it creative accounting to do a play on words. Indeed, creative accounting is a practice that intends to follow the standard accounting practices, but to deviate from the spirits of the rules. As far as I was concerned, it was clear that it was an artistic workshop. But some students were so far from thinking about artistic creation in a master's of accounting that they came with books on creative accounting, convinced that they would follow a 4-day lesson about it. Imagine how confused they were when I presented the artistic workshop and when I introduced Philippe. Indeed, in order to work, this workshop needed to be headed by a double-hatted person who knew accounting and management as a discipline and who was able to lead students in an artistic way. And this rare pearl was Philippe. So he will explain you how it worked.
Well, so I'm the pearl of the workshop. How did we organize this workshop concretely? The idea was that the students, as Gwenaëlle just explained, had absolutely no idea about art, absolutely no will to do art, to make art in any way. None of them had any artistic practice of any kind, even an amateur one or anything. So the first idea was to start from the students themselves and their involvement in the masters. So their involvement in the master was specifically about accounting issues, audit, accounting or control or research issues. So we started from this point and not from artistic interrogation or practices. That was the first point. That is why the workshop started with the organizing discussions where every student, each of them, had to speak personally about his involvement into the master. What subject was really interesting for him or her, how he was considering these issues, what he was thinking, what he or she was thinking about norms, about responsibility, about figures, numbers, and so on. And the second step of the workshop was, after their explaining their involvement into the masters, to create groups according to their affinities between the persons and between their subjects. Some of them were interested by norms and the relation between norms and research. Some of them were interested by fraud in accounting. Some of them were interested by social responsibility and how is it taken in account. Some of them were interested about change and how things are moving and changing and how you deal with that, especially in complex environment. So we made groups around these themes. So the second steps was to deepen the concern of these groups about these themes, these specific technical themes in accounting. So they worked for half a day in groups with the assignment to produce kind of a statement, a very strong statement about what they were believing in as a group about such and such themes. The second part of the assignments was to tell this statement in front of the group. So to really present their belief and their understanding of norms or change or and so on. So it was not at all artistic at that point, except that from this first part of the workshop, some of the students, they came in front of the group and performed kind of a theater play, very spontaneously, just to make it clear what they had to tell about numbers. So that was how the workshop went, only by making the students expressing very clearly, very strongly what they were thinking about technical issues. They were slowly diving into an expression that was more and more artistic in a way. So the third step was to go deeper into that process and to ask them, after they have expressed their interest in the masters by words, verbal, they had to also write the words and to go into writing text. Then they were asked to do it in a non-verbal manner. So any kind of non-verbal, there was no indication. They could do anything they wanted. They could use images, objects, performances. They could do whatever they wanted, except it had to be non-verbal. So they were brainstorming about this issue, about this question, and they started to have many ideas. Then they had the following step was to realize these non-verbal expression of what they were thinking, their ideas about, let's say, norms. According to this realization, they had been allotted a budget. Each group had a budget of 150 euro to go shopping. They had to decide what they will make their idea visible with which form they will make it visible. So some of them, they went to buy painting, some of them went to buy materials, some of them went to buy plastic letters, some of them went to buy knives and scissors. You will see the picture afterwards. They had also an assignment during all the days that was to manage these 4 days organization that they had to put in practice. They had to make a planification on the different dimension of it, the money dimension, budget, the time dimension, because 4 days for producing artworks, expression is a very short amount of time, so they had to manage the time. They had also to manage their own organization as team members. There were 4 or 5 in each group, so they had to organize themselves and decide who will produce, who will lead the group, who will write, and so on. And they also had to manage the organization of the show itself. The workshop had been presented as, in the end, there will be an exhibition of what you will produce. So they had to organize all together, all the groups together, around the exhibition. Where will it be? How will it be presented? How will it be explained to the visitors, and so on. So the last step of the workshop was the exhibition itself, where the students occupied a room. A room was specially dedicated to this, a very beautiful room in the university. The reception room at the 7th floor with a beautiful view over Paris. So it was kind of a very nice gallery space. So they had to occupy the space, decide where they put their work, and then to put the text also. The text they produced had also to be part of the exhibition. So they had to decide how the text will be visible and to introduce their work and the exhibition to the visitors. So now I will show you what had been produced. So we had 5 groups. So there is no order in the presentation, so I will say the first, but there is no first and last. So the first group you see now is a group who decided to work about numbers, and especially they wanted to work about the domination of numbers in our societies and how is it compulsory, can we get rid of the numbers or not, and they called their artwork, they called it, well, this is a joke in French, they called it domination incontrôlée, which means the translation is uncontrolled domination, but un is one. So you could tell it in English, one controlled domination. So it was made of a big Earth, planet Earth, as you can see, which was made of a balloon, a plastic balloon with the continents painted on it, and a big pi number, the big number that you can see on top of it, which was made on very cheap material, cardboard, very roughly assembled, and painted in gold. So to speak about the value of the numbers, and the number pi, I don't know how you tell it in English, is linked, is tied to the Earth, or Earth is tied to the number by a rope, as you can see. And if you come closer to the rope, you can see that the rope is almost broken. So you don't know whether the link, the tie between Earth, planet Earth, and the numbers will be broken or not. So it was the first artwork that we had. The second artwork that you can see now was by the group who decided to work about fraud. So they decided after a long brainstorming, it was one of the group who had a lot of, not difficulty, but it took a lot of time to make a decision about the right idea. So the final idea that you can see here is in fact 2 ideas. You have a net, hanging net from the ceiling, and in this net is filled with balance sheets, real balance sheets that they printed out from the internet of very big companies. And all these balance sheets are torn apart or meshed up together in the net. Some of them are falling apart, and on the floor where the sheets are falling, there is a big board, a black board, like a mirror, where there are some letters, as you can see, and the letters are writing not very clearly. You had to be very careful to read it. It's they're writing the names of the last very big scandals in finance, like Enron, things like that. So this was the work of this group, and the name of it was "And You," because their text, that you can see the text at the right of the picture. It was very nicely framed in gold again, and it was like a poem, if you want. And this kind of poem was talking about fraud, and finishing by "and you," and proposing the idea that fraud is always here, and everybody is always frauding, and that "and you, are you too frauding or not?" So that was the second artwork. The third artwork, this one you can see here, and you can see now that they are very different in the conception, but all were made of assemblage, of montage of objects, mainly. No pictures. This was their decision. It was not imposed by me or by anybody. This one was about change. The group decided to work about change, more precisely, change in very complex environment. So they decided to make visible the fact that change is always going on, and that change is never satisfying in complex environment. That is, you always have to change and to adapt, and if you stop, I mean, you're wrong. You always have to go forward. So they decided to reflect this idea, this main idea, by bicycle wheels, as you can see, old bicycle wheels. That was the idea that change is always old and new at the same time, and never perfect. So the wheels, as you can see, they don't have tires. Some of them are a little bit destroyed, a little bit damaged, but they all can move around. They all can turn like a wheel. You can move in the exhibition, you can go in the exhibition and move the wheels and have all the wheels turning around, all of them at different speeds and together, above kind of context, if you want. The big boxes on the floors are covered with many newspapers describing our complex economic environment. The text behind, that you can see not very clearly, but the text is very roughly written on cardboard. That was their way to present the text, and they just decide not to write text, but they choose quotes on the internet or in books. So you have philosophical quotes, economic quotes by very famous writers about change, about world, about complexity, and so on. The title, there was no title for this work. The fourth artwork that was produced is the one you can see here. It was called Illusion. I don't know it by heart, so you can read it now. It was called Illusion, floue, réalité, satinée. The translation in English is illusion, blurred, reality, and satin. It was a pun on the letters IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards. They decided to work on these international norms in accounting to reflect and to think about the idea, does a really strong international standard in accounting, is it good or bad? How can it be good? How can you apply it in local context? Has research anything to do with such an imposed standard? Can you move it or not? Can you think of it or not? So to make this very clear, they focused on the idea that such a standard is double-edged. It's like a double-edged knife, for example, a double-edged weapon that can hurt as well as it can help. So they decided to produce this object, this very special and strong object you can see in the middle on the tables, made of very dangerous objects like knives, big scissors, and all cutting objects that were all attached to a big chain. All this made of big steel, bright steel, that were coming out of a box, as you can see. So like you draw your norm, you draw the standards out of the box, and you can use it or it can hurt you. So this was the third group, and they also produce a text explaining all this in a very short and concentrated way, and they made a poster, a big poster that you can see on the left side that was posted on the window of the room. The last work that we'll see now was a smaller one, very simple, as you can see. It was cylinder, these towers, like transparent towers, filled with people. And these people, I'm sorry I don't have a closer picture, but these people, the towers, the transparent towers, are filled with small figures of people, very roughly made by hand, very naively made, if you want, of paper, of a kind of a modeling paste of paper, modeling paper paste. And all are the same, but all are different. And the work is called team building. So it was about social responsibility. This group was working about social responsibility, and they wanted to be very critical about the fact that social responsibility is more or less, and more often than no, a greenwashing, kind of a facade that enterprise and company propose, but behind what they wanted to show is that the companies, the firms, are all transparent cylinders filled with people like material. So that was the last artwork that we had. You have now a picture of the notebooks of the students. That was another part of the methodology of the workshop. Each student had to take notes in a notebook and to keep tracks of everything that was happening, and tracks of his thoughts, of his ideas, of her thinking, and so on. So it was also for us a way to keep tracks and to record the event of the workshop, to make research possible afterwards, research on this special way of teaching. And you have another picture here after that shows you a montage of different phases of the workshop where the students are working, discussing, working together, starting to produce. We had a very big room that was an exam room at the beginning, with the tables all aligned very precisely, very organized room for exam, one room for each student, everything very square and controllable. And we turned this exam room into a big art workshop where for 4 days it was a studio with a lot of material and people working in every corner of the room. Okay, now what we can do about the outcomes of the workshop. I mean, another part of the methodology was how did we coach the students. So we decided to coach the students and not to deliver any information, any suggestion, any rule. So we were here to help the students to select between their ideas, to discuss their ideas, and help them to realize. Personally, being an artist, I had the experience of when you realize an object, you face some very specific issues like gluing, cutting, assembling. It has to hold together. How can you tie a rope around a balloon, a plastic balloon, and it will hold, and you don't have to stick it, you don't have to glue it, and technical things like this. So I was here to help them for the technical realization, to make sure it will work. So it was mainly coaching. During the first assignment, which was about expression, about the themes that the students had chosen, we helped them to go deeper and deeper into their thinking. So one role of the coaching was also to insist on first putting some checkpoints in the time, so being a timekeeper first, and installing some checkpoints where the students had to present some things, and to make sure that each team of students was in time and was progressing correctly. For the overall workshop, we had this timekeeping, and in a way that was very specific. At the same time, there were not enough time and a lot of time. So this was a part of the workshop that was very specific, difficult to manage, and that is possibly an improvement that we can bring to this experiment. That is, the time 4 days was a short time, but inside this time, the students, because also of the organization in different teams, had to wait sometimes a long period of times for going through the checkpoints. Or they also had to wait because they couldn't find an agreement between themselves, or because they couldn't find the solution. One group, for example, the group with the knives and scissors and this object, they were not satisfied with their object just before the opening. So they were facing the object saying, it doesn't work, it's not good. We don't know what's wrong, but it's not good. I had no answer. I was agreeing that it was not good. It was not really compelling. It was not really touching for the people. So they had to find something. So here they spent time just looking at the object, thinking, trying ideas. And in the end, they found the idea of the box that you have seen. So there was this managing of time that was also a difficulty of the workshop. Now, if we come to the outcomes of the workshop, outcomes is first responding to the goals of the workshop. The first goal, to build a team, to build a cohesive group, was something that was achieved according to all of the students. They had a very strong experience, an experience that they will remember, maybe not lifelong experience, but an experience that they remembered 6 months after. It was still very strong in their memories and in their conception. The second outcome was that they practiced a non-standard management. They were organized in a very specific ways. For example, they had to decide of the use of their budget, but of course they will not be sure that their choice will be the right choice for realizing their idea. So they had to decide, how can I decide to use the resource, to use the money, and at the same time to make a use of it and not being sure that this use is the right one. Do I keep some part of the budget free for possible mistakes? Do I make a bet and I use all of my budget and I will see and I will adapt? So they had to manage this. They also had to manage the time, we spoke of it. They also had to manage their own organization, where it was not possible to decide on straightforward basis. It was not possible to decide who will lead the group, who had the capacity to do this or that, because it was unknown what the competencies they will know. One student told in the end, we used competencies that we didn't know we had. So how to plan the use of competencies that you don't know that you have? This is also a very non-standard management that can be very useful to know in real life. A third outcome is what you've just seen in the pictures. It was an art production of a very high quality. According to an art critic who came to his exhibition, some of the work, more than half of the work, it means 3 and 5, were totally at the level of contemporary art exhibition. That was surprising for the students, for us, and for the art people that were here. How can you take accounting students 4 days with no experience in art, no special competence in art, and have them produce really good artwork within 4 days? So this is a question, this is an issue that is very interesting too. But what I will focus on is that this very good art production, we analyze it at the moment in two senses. The first is that these artwork were just expression of their ideas about issues that they perfectly know. This make this artwork good. They were focused in the expression, they had something to tell, and this appeared in the end when the students in front of their own artworks discovered what they meant, really. They discovered more fully, more complexly the meaning that they had decided to put in the work. So this is the second step, the second outcome of this realization. It gave them a critical positioning. As you've seen, in their themes they've chosen and the way they dealt with the themes, they chose a very critical stance on the different issues. And this critical positioning and the critical reflection that started shortly and was not pushed to what it could have been, but it could be, was a critical reflection about main issues in accounting, like norms, like change, like social responsibility, and so on. So the students characterized the workshop in the end. We made interviews after the workshop, during the workshop, and after the workshop. So they characterized this workshop especially about this deep reflection that they had, and they explicitly explained that they had a deeper reflection that they had in any other moment in the master. And for them, this deep reflection was linked to the fact that they had to give a physical form to their expression. For them, that was the difference. They had also reflection in the master, in the courses, of course, intellectual reflection, intellectual thinking. But for them, it was not that deep. It was not as deep as they had in the workshop because of the lack of physical expression. Then we have next slide. We have a second kind of outcomes, which is maybe more research-oriented for us, for the pedagogical point of view. This one is that they did not perceive the fact of producing artwork as a disruptive, totally extraordinary, and amazingly far from their ordinary behavior. They were, of course, very surprised at the beginning of the workshop. Gwenaëlle told about this. But after this, they were not specifically in the interviews, for example, on their behavior, they were not specifically insisting on the fact that it was totally impossible for them to cope with this, or that they had to be irrational, and that was a problem to be irrational, or that the logic of producing an artwork is something that they cannot cope with because it's different from the logic of being irrationally between a rational accountant, for example, accountant. So, and they even more, they expressed in sentences, they expressed that going deeper and beyond the verbal expression was still doing analysis. And that was similar to research. So they make a continuum where analysis is still going on, going from verbal to non-verbal, from rational to sensible expression. This is, I think, very interesting because it gives us, as teaching, a very good insight in other ways to engage students in reflection about their own scientific knowledge. And it also gives us the very interesting idea and perspective that integrating art within the curriculum, the scientific curriculum, is possible. And that you don't have to conceive art as a disruptive thing, but it can also be conceived as an integrating part of the scientific teaching. And this is the last conceptual outcome of this workshop, that is that thinking, which is not new, of course, but it's kind of a concrete proof that thinking is not only achieved by mental training or intellectual training, but thinking is also achieved by making, and in that case by art making. So this is the last research track that you can develop. Thank you.
I can say in the end, goals were achieved and even surpassed, despite the reluctance of the students the first day. First, students actually were very proud of themselves, and a real cohesion emerged among them. All of them said it was an adventure to experience one's life, maybe. Once a year, I don't know. Second, they changed the manner they considered their discipline. As Philippe told you, we were quite surprised that they considered their discipline in a very critical way. Third, and you did not mention it, but they learned how to be rigorous in another way from what they are used to. Auditing and accounting practice demands much rigor. And I was surprised that some were lacking it, and that some considered that contemporary art was a matter of impulse. So the third and the fourth day, they were surprised to see that Philippe wanted to get the better of them and wanted things to be done properly. He was very demanding. So too will their managers be in a couple of months, because they are at the end of their training. I think the workshop was a good preparation for them as well for this demanding work. So this was definitely a very good experience we are about to renew in September. I think you have a... Okay. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. In your view, can we apply this into other disciplines? As far as I could understand, this can be applied in every other discipline. This can be a unique experience for other classes, for other students.
The question is, can this experiment be applied to other disciplines? I think yes, but I will...
I mean, my answer will be yes. And one of the purpose of the experiment was specifically to go into a very far field from art or from what art is considered good at, like, for example, leadership or team building or development of the self or things like that, or human resource management for relationships and communication skills. So we decided to go into a field that is totally far from these kind of application of art in order to find another deep reason why art should be interesting in teaching. So for me, it really demonstrates that it can be applied to any kind of discipline, yes. Because of these reasons that we explained, that are not relying on the traditional characteristic of art, that is expression of the self, impulsion, emotions, that are, of course, very present in the artwork you had here. But there is also something different, and this something different can be exploited in any field of activity, I think.
But I think it's reserved for Master's 2 degree or PhD program. We have an idea about that.
Yes, because you, as I remember, you told that they knew very well the subject at the beginning of the workshop. So they knew exactly about what they're working, and that's why they decided to explain themselves like this.
Actually, they knew much about accounting.
Yes, that's what. Yes.
Yes. They know the techniques very well. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. And which one did they won anything at the end?
No, they didn't win anything.
Okay.
Because we could give a gift, but how could we say?
What did you do after the exposition? Because I didn't remember. Was it open to everybody?
Yes, we had
I
invited everybody in
didn't
Dauphine
remember.
University.
Unfortunately, I could not attend this.
The thing is, our president told us we could exhibit in Dauphine. The thing is, for security
Oh yes.
reasons, it was quite difficult. We had knives and.
Okay. And did you keep the artworks after the exhibition, or the students took away with themselves?
The question is, did we keep the piece of art? The pieces of art. Actually, we did. I have some of them in my office, and the others are in Dauphine, but not acceptable.
About this question is very interesting, because for the success of such experience, you can wonder whether, for example, giving more time to the students, could it be a good idea or not? I think no. I think the constraint of a very short time is very important. Same if we decided to put really this artwork, like artworks, on the art market, for example, or in galleries, to give them kind of a status of an achieved or work of art that has a value and can be considered in itself. I'm not sure, this is a question, I'm not sure it will be as powerful. Maybe destroying the artwork in the end, like for example, we had an opening and an exhibition for a couple of hours only. So we are thinking of transforming this into more, a longer duration, but there is no correct answer to this, I think.
Stéphane de Benedetti a une question. Oui, alors comment je fais? Je fais comme ça? Alors, how do you interpret the fact that students were reluctant at first? And the second, did this experience make a difference in the research works of the master students during the year as compared with previous years? They were reluctant, as I would have been reluctant, actually, because when you don't know anything about art, you feel very confused, and I really don't like doing art. I like seeing art, but I don't like doing it. And I think they just thought, oh my God, I quitted the lycée, the undergraduate school, not to do art anymore. And then I embrace an audit program, and they ask me to do something with my hands. I think that's why they were reluctant, and I think some of them would not have chosen this master if they had known. The first day they were in front of the coffee machine and they could hear, what do we do? It's not our business. We are not here to do that, etc. And afterwards, they had theoretical courses that began. And I think they had another way. Another way of attending these courses, and I was very pleased because it was the first time on a forum. We have a forum for the masters in Dauphine, and I could hear one of the students saying another one, "Oh, we do research, but you know, it's quite interesting. It can bring you to think differently the discipline, etc." So there he was, and this guy was very, very far from being an artist, but he told the other one that research was quite important, and you can see the discipline in another way, etc. So it was funny.
Do you think that during the year it changes the behavior of students? Do you think they are more creative, and also for the exam at the end?
The question is, did it change their behavior in the year? Actually, I did not notice it. They thought that Philippe had been very hard with them. And during the year, they said, it was so demanding. He was so demanding. But it's a parenthèse, how do you say that? It's a bracket in the training program. And, well, it's an identity for them now to have done this workshop. And it's funny because this year, well, now people know that it's a creative workshop, but it's not about creative accounting. But this year, I had one student who came to the entretien de sélection, the selection interview, and told me, I want to go to your master's because of an artistic workshop. That's funny. I think that's all. Non, il n'y a pas d'autres questions. What do you plan to change for next year?
So what do we plan to change? Many things. First, about the last question, did it change the behavior of the students during the year? And we didn't notice very clear change in their behavior during the year, because one thing we will change is that it's as for any other course. If you just do the course one day, and if you expect 6 months later that it has changed something into the behavior of students, I mean, I don't know, you can believe in it. So you have to redo things, to deepen the learnings along the year. So this is something that we will try to change, to continue to go on working on what has emerged during the workshop in order to transform it into a constant or a deeper state of mind, for example. We'll see. So we will change this. We will also change the fact that during the workshop, the students have worked, as we explained, about themes that they chose, technical themes of accounting. When they worked on these themes, the time was very short. It was the beginning of the year. They were the start of second year. So they did knew a lot of things about accounting, but they were not. They were still Master 1 students. So when they were investigating the question of norms, for example, or the question of social responsibility and how you take this into account in accounting practices, they were a little bit alone in their thinking. There were no faculty helping them to reflect on these very technical themes. So we want also to change this and to help them to go really deeper